Joe, we're back. And guess what? Today we're talking AFL draft. Is it compromised? What's happening? This year, I think, was the year where the most picks ever were taken in the first round. And a lot of those, yes, there was your draft compensation, which I think is another topic of should it happen and should it not. But so many father son bids, so many academy bids, kind of pushing it out and not really punishing the teams for getting this automatic player. How you doing, Joe?
Yeah, doing well. Um, you know my views. I love the father
Mhm.
son. I think it is one of the most special things that we've got going around. Out of all the sports, it is something unique to the
Mhm.
AFL, and I would like it protected as much as possible. But when it comes to the academies and the academy selections, I think there's definitely a lot of people up in arms about it.
Yeah. So it's not really fair, in your opinion, to kind of put both of them together, right? Say, hey, they're a lump sum problem. What's happening? We got to really change both to really make the game better.
For me, I do consider them to be different sort of picks. I
Hmm.
understand that to some extent they are both contributing to sort of messing up the draft order and someone that could be potentially getting someone like, for example, a Nick Dacos or
Yep.
or a Will Ashcroft. But in my opinion, there are so many father sons that go through the system. You know, for every Nick Dacos, there's three or four, even five father sons that don't make as much of an impact. And I
Yes.
think it's really special for players, young boys and sons watching their father play for a team, walking in their dressing room, being part of the club, feeling like a family at that club,
Hmm.
and don your jersey for the first time playing football in your dad's colors in the team that you've grown up barracking for. I think it's a really special thing, which is completely out of everyone's control. But when it
Yeah.
comes to the next generation academy picks, though, or the Northern Academy picks, I think those are part of a system that
Yep.
can be changed.
Yeah. And I guess kind of NGA fits in with that as well. I mean, this year we really haven't had that much impact because it has been changed recently, but it has been changed because it was affecting teams so much.
Correct. Ever since you had the Bulldogs getting Jamara Ugle-Hagan across, and with
Hmm.
essentially who was the best pick in the draft in that year, and
Yep.
Adelaide were basically who bid on Jamara at pick one were forced to basically settle with Riley Thilthorpe at pick two. And when
Yep.
you think about who you would rather have at that selection, I know for sure I'd want Jamara over Riley. No disrespect to Riley Thilthorpe, right? Like, he's still a young guy
Mm.
building up, but just between these two, I think you can see that which one you'd rather have.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like when North mixed out on Dacos and we had to take Horn Francis and then he left. So, it is what it is. It happens, but you'd rather have the better player on the day.
Yeah, correct. And so there's a bunch of people out there, a lot of Victorian clubs, but not just that. This
Mm.
is, I think, a different sort of year because it's not only Victorian teams that are whinging, right, as the Queenslanders would like to say. You've also got, Western Australians, like in West Coast, for example, who are really upset that they missed out on Collard because
Yep.
he went by. He was picked up. He was in their next generation academy. But because of the rules now around, hey, top 40 pick, you can't match the bid, all of a sudden that's just completely thrown all of the other states under the bus. And we're now popping up the Queenslanders and the New South Wales teams on a higher pedestal.
Like, I can kind of understand what they're saying, right? Sometimes with these players, you take them from nothing, you kind of give all that investment in time and money to them. But sucked in West Coast, like, you missed out on your player. You should have picked him earlier. You should have traded your first round pick for like 18 picks. You could have taken it with North picks. If you really wanted Collard, you would have traded Harley Reid for all of North Melbourne's picks, like we asked, and you could have taken him with pick 18, and then we wouldn't be complaining. You're greedy. That's what you get.
Riley Collard isn't pick 18 material, though.
Doesn't matter. He was available at the pick. You could have had the pick. That's it. Some draft
No.
boards had North taking him in the teens. I'm sorry.
Ultimately, what you need to
He was
do,
lucky he slid down that far.
look, every team has to do what's best for themselves and what's best for their list. And of course,
Well, Pollard clearly wasn't
they
the
would
best for
love,
their list. He
oh,
wasn't
they
the
would,
best for their list.
yeah, he wasn't, but he's definitely a player that you would love to have. If he was in Sydney, they would be able to pick him up, no worries, and match any sort of bid. Why is
Well,
Sydney able to get this player that West Coast couldn't get this player just by virtue of their location?
and North Melbourne would have been able to pick Riley Sanders if North Melbourne was in Sydney as well. So it happens.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
this inequality in the system is causing a lot of headaches for people. I
Mhm.
know we at Essendon managed to pip out the Bulldogs and we pick up Lual with pick 39, which
Yep.
really I was so happy about because stuff you Western Bulldogs for stuffing us up with the Dunkley trade. Stuff you, will take your player just before the deadline. But
Yeah.
essentially, there are a bunch of people out there. No one is happy with it. The northern states are absolutely lapping this up. Get stuffed. This is not correct. We need to make some adjustments. And today we're going to talk about some.
Yep. We're going to have a look at a few different options, some in the media, some we've kind of come up with ourselves that have been posted as, hey, how do we change things? How do we make it a bit more fair for your teams? They just haven't had any of these picks. I mean, when was the last time Geelong got an academy? Think of Geelong.
Poor Geelong.
Or Geelong. I can't really say that because they're basically Gold Coast Academy right now. Every time a player wants to leave back to Victoria, Gold Coast is like, hey, come to our academy club. It's right here. So, yeah.
Well, option one that we've got here to talk about is when you are matching a bid, you have to use picks of that same round. So essentially what that means is if someone is making a bid on a player that you have in your academy that is in the first round, you have to give up a first round pick of your own in order to match that bid. Now, the interesting thing about this is giving up a first round pick means that you're not exactly going to be meeting the points requirement point for point. So that's going to have to, the AFL will have to sort of tinker with that and sort of have it where, it doesn't have to necessarily be a point for point allocation. It's just simply, all right, fine, you've ticked the requirement of, you've matched that sort of bracket of the quality of pick.
Before you kind of go a bit further into it as well, the AFL has said, well, the proposed idea was if you don't have a first rounder for, say, you could use the one for next year. So you'd be spending a future pick. And then in essence, you'd still be getting 2 first rounders over 2 years. I think if that does happen, if this rule comes in, points are just gone because it really turns into, cool, you just stack second rounders because you think your player's coming in the second round. You get a couple of first rounders because you think your player's coming in the first round. So I almost don't mind it because if we look at like a Collingwood with Nick Dacos, for example, actually, no, let's go a Riley Sanders to the Dogs. So they traded all their picks to escape the Jordan Croft pick. If they hadn't, then they'd be losing their pick to Jordan Croft, right? So essentially under this rule, they've now wasted next year's pick to keep Croft and Sanders. So it kind of evens out a little bit.
Yeah. And I think it also sort of, if we go down this route, people like Cal Toomey, who we obviously have a lot of respect for on the channel, and everybody in the wider community also has a big respect for him. He's one that has been advocating for quite some time now in order for clubs to have the ability to trade future picks further in the future than just the next year. And that's something that the AFL has been limiting so far up until this point. And Cal Toomey is of the opinion that, hey, you should be able to, these clubs, they know what's required by their own teams, and they would understand the risks associated with trading multiple picks well into the future. The NBA does it. Why not have the AFL do it? And if in a situation where you've traded away your first round pick, for example, in order to get other draft picks or other players across, if you don't have a future first to match this bid, you could give up the next year's future first. And that just sort of gives clubs extra flexibility without, I think, compromising the draft to give them a really cheap way to get high talent.
Yeah, and I think it puts a bit more value on the draft as well, because a lot of teams, I know at Geelong not so much, but you look at a Port Adelaide and a West Coast and a few others where they've just kind of traded out of the draft almost. Like, hey, we don't have many picks, we don't need to worry about it. It is what it is. So now they've kind of got to worry about it a little bit. Hey, do we value this player, or do we value kind of a player we've got on our list instead of just getting the player from the draft for free?
Correct. Another way that the AFL can have it where the value of the picks are heightened is by option 2, limiting clubs' ability to match these picks to be able to use no more than 2 picks per match.
Yeah.
So, for example, rather than having West Coast be able to give up 5 picks in the 40s, you can only use 2 picks to get those points.
Yeah. Or what happened with Gold Coast like this year, and then Jed Walter went to the club, picked 2 for what? Like a pick in the 30s, 3 40s, and then that was it. So yeah. I don't mind this one. It does make a bit more relevance to clubs stacking up picks later on. But then also it makes picks in the 20s a lot more valuable as well. Because if you've got a kid coming through, maybe you can trade off your first round. Maybe you can even use your first round pick if it's early. But you better have these second round picks. You better have these picks in the 20s. Because with the 20% discount, it's still probably pick 20 and pick. I reckon you can go 25, 28. It's probably worth like a pick 5 or 6, and like that's it. So there's not that extra bit at the end to really mop up the points.
Yeah, but also as you're saying, you need to start having more of these picks in the 20s. But that also means that the trades that clubs are doing between each other aren't like sort of loose change trades, like simply offloading a pick to get a bunch of random ass picks in the 40s and the 50s, right?
Oh, well, that's what we saw with Gold Coast.
And that's what we saw with Gold Coast, exactly. By having it, if this option is taken up, then it means that the trades that clubs are going to be doing between each other in relation to draft picks are going to be worthwhile, are going to be meaningful, because we're going to be seeing the changing of hands of picks in the 20s as opposed to picks in the 40s and the 50s, which don't matter as much. So so it becomes more newsworthy as well.
100%.
Now, a third option that we've got here in relation to fixing this is one that is a little bit out there, very different. If you're going to use a pick to match a bid, it's got to be within 9 picks of that selection, meaning that it's going to be within half a round, essentially, of that selection. Do you think this is something that could work out?
It could work out, but it makes it really, really hard to match a bid, because we've had times when some people, let's use this year as an example, right? Some draft boards had some of these plays really, really early. And then some draft boards had plays really, really late. So for teams to be able to pick up those players, or at least I'm going to say abuse the academy system to get a bid later on, it's really, really hard to do that. So this one I'm not so much of a fan of, because at that point, you might as well just pick the player. Like, you want this guy to come to your club. You're almost just waiting for the match to come in. Imagine North Melbourne, for example. We have pick 1. We've got a kid who we want to pick in the first round. We've got to somehow get a pick between what? Pick 4 or 5 and pick 20. And if we get a late teens pick now, we can't even match it at the bid at pick 5. Like, the math just doesn't work out for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're someone like Gold Coast, for example, who had a player in Jed Walter, his bid came very early. You know what I mean? Like his bid was at pick 3. So for this one to be half a round later, so 9 selections, you'd have to offer, pick 11 or better in order to match that bid. So Gold Coast would have to, rather than have Gold Coast just simply trade out and cash in all of these high draft picks in order to exchange them for really crappy 40s and 50s picks to match it in terms of points, they have to keep their hands on a pick that's essentially a top 10 pick in
Yeah.
order to match a bid for a top 10 player. So in that respect, that sort of makes sense, I think. Being able to have to give up a top 10 pick to get a top 10 pick player.
I guess you could look at it the other way though and say, cool, a Melbourne that's just won the grand final, they've got pick 18 and they've got a top 5 pick that's now tied to their club somehow, father, son, really good player, like Clayton Oliver's kid, that he just wants to play for his dad's club. They now have to give up probably next year's draft hand with pick 18 to be able to match like a bid on him. It costs too much, Joe.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, right?
Well, I mean, I guess so.
All right. Well, there is something though that both of us, I think, are pretty sold on, and that is the no more 20% discounts on matching of bids.
Yes. Yeah, it's something that I've been pretty pretty certain on for a while, and I think it just needs to change. Even if they don't fix anything else, doing this itself fixes a lot of issues, right? Because now your pick 1, pick 10, whatever, you can match it with 3 bids, but not 3 picks that now are 20%. The bid price is now 20% less.
Yeah, like you're gonna. So because it makes sense, you know what I mean? Like thinking about it. Oh, you don't have a pick there, but you are jumping up the draft to get this caliber player, but you're also getting him 20% cheaper. Like you're having the ability to jump ahead in the queue, whilst also getting a discount. Mate, sign me up. I want to be a member of this this shopping coupon sort of thing.
Yeah, you go to the shop, you get a free ice cream and then an extra scoop on top of it. Like, come on, man, you can't have both ways.
Whilst jumping the queue as well.
Whilst jumping the queue. Yeah.
So that's pretty good. One option that we've got here as well that we've sort of raised as well is the top 40 restriction, as all of the other clubs that are not in New South Wales and Queensland are complaining about, is that pick top 40 is a really big restriction on not being able to match picks. That should also apply to the Northern Academies. Do you think that this is something that could work?
I think so. The only problem I have with it is some people have flagged it on Discord, on Big Footy and some other things, that maybe it would lead to a lot of these kind of more outreach type areas not getting that investment anymore, because clubs, hey, Gold Coast, why are they going to put money into the Northern Territory if they can't even get access to that type of player at an early pick? That player would still get picked up by the AFL. So maybe kind of it would have to change the whole format of the Northern Academies to make it work, or academies in general. Just say, cool, make it like chain stores, right? You've got your head store, that's the AFL, and then every state has an academy program, but instead of being tied to a club or a region, maybe tied to a region. You work for Gold Coast, you're part of Gold Coast Academy, but ultimately you're an AFL player. Instead of it being cool, North Melbourne's one is different to this club, different to this club, different to this club. That'd probably be the way to make it work.
I always find it personally hilarious whenever someone talks about Gold Coast spending money. Get out of here. It's not Gold Coast spending money. It's the AFL spending money,
already that's what's happening. And it would probably lead to, I don't know if you know personally, but North Melbourne actually stopped their NGA happening during COVID because we just couldn't fund it. So maybe this kind of idea would actually lead to a few more NGAs and kids in general getting picked up because they haven't fallen through the cracks.
Yeah, well, I understand when it comes to like, New South Wales and Queensland aren't AFL
states.
They are rugby states. And I understand that these academies, sort of allow people to have that taste of football and experience of football in their communities and things like that. I completely understand that. But I think for it, though, to be automatically straight to New South Wales teams or straight to Queensland teams, like you're going to play there, well, if they've invested enough in order to be good enough to play AFL level football, then why not bring them to a football state? Have them be even more ingrained, like in the Victorian bubble, for example, or in WA or in South Australia, which are also diehard footy fans. Let them experience what it's if they're willing to give up so much of their lives and so much effort to pursue a career in football. I think they should be open to being picked up by teams in a football state. And I
Yeah.
think they'll be able to fit in well because they're essentially buying into that culture and that love of footy anyway.
Yeah, and it will probably lead a little bit to players not being so worried about moving into state and things like that. Like if they had to move around a little bit, sign them up, help to pay for their accommodation, whatever. Hey, look, you've got 3 weeks in Melbourne. Look, you've got 3 weeks in Perth at this club. Move around to this one, move around to this one. Make the academy program a pool of players instead of, oh, Gold Coast is hiding their players over here. Don't look at my players. You know, we just can't see them. Oh, look, now they're top 10 picks and stuff you because I get them for cheap.
Oh, no, they're now in Geelong.
Oh, yeah, well, that too.
With other picks, like Jack Bowes, for example, that went with pick 7. So,
100%.
Yeah. Well, guys, those were 5 options that we've discussed here in this video that the AFL can implement in order to try and change up the fiasco that currently is the NGA or just the academy system.
Yeah. I mean, outside of Gold Coast fans, I think everybody can probably say something needs to change. And we've put up some ideas. Let us know in the comments, hey, do you agree? Do you disagree? What's going on? As Joe and Big J are just nuts. Leave our players alone.
Leave the father-son alone, God damn it. And if you agree with me about the father-son, also let us know in the comments down below. Regardless,
Definitely.
guys, make sure you give us a like and a subscribe. Would be much appreciated. Hit that notification bell because we are pumping out some videos here, general football content, and then we'll also be having some more Supercoach stuff when Gold comes out around the corner. So please stay tuned.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully you can join us for this journey. Mate, footy's over, but the centre bounce isn't.
No, centre bounce is not over because here we do the hard work. So you don't have to. Bye for now.
See you later.